Good news, everybody. Gladiator 2 is finally here.
Yay!
That's right, folks. Elderly, dementia-riddled director Ridley Scott has managed to escape the shackles of hospice care to take a seat in the director's chair one more time and bring the world a movie that literally no one asked for. But, as the old saying goes, age is just a number. And, considering the quality of movies that he's made over the past 20 years, what could possibly go wrong? So, has Old Man Ridley managed to stop sundowning long enough to make a decent movie? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. Sit back, relax, and try to hold down the vomit, folks, as we take a spoiler-free look at Gladiator 2. So, Gladiator 2 starts like any great movie, in the year 200 AD in the region of North Africa called Numidia, and this is where we meet Hanno, a humble farmer who lives with his wife doing all the things that humble farmers do, planting seeds, raising chickens, and slaughtering cows. Sadly, however, this quiet life doesn't last for too long, as the city finds itself under attack by a cruel and evil empire. That's right, the Roman army, led by General Marcus Acacius, begins a naval attack to take the city for the glory of Rome. And I'm sure all of you history buffs will be excited to hear that this was a real historical event that happened about 300 years before the time that this movie takes place in. However, since this is a Ridley Scott movie where historical accuracy typically means nothing, the timeline being this off shouldn't really be a surprise.
The sharks were not there in real life, but it's fucking cool.
You're dead wrong.
Did they have sharks back then?
A couple of sharks in a net from the sea. Are you kidding? Of course they could.
Are you fucking retarded?
Don't worry, I'm not going to talk about all the historical inaccuracies of this movie because if I did, this video would be 10 hours long. However, just in case you're interested, here's a short list. Eventually, the Roman army wins the battle. Hanno's wife is killed, he's made a prisoner of war, and forced into slavery. Shortly after his capture, he's forced to fight a bunch of terrible-looking CGI baboons, where he gets the attention of Gladiator owner Macrinus, who promises him the chance to gain his freedom and one day take revenge on the man who killed his wife if he's able to win enough fights in Rome. Wait, why does this part of the movie sound so familiar?
Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture.
Okay, I already see one. Give him.
They're the same picture.
Anyway, back in Rome, the entire city rejoices as General Acacius returns as a conquering hero. And this is where we meet co-emperors and twin brothers Geta and Caracalla, who spend most of their days laughing, smiling, and spitting while they talk.
Gods have spoken!
Say it, don't spray it.
After Acacius makes his grand entrance into the city, he is told that gladiatorial games will be held in his honor. As the first day of the games commences, Acacius arrives with his wife, Lucilia, who I'm sure you all remember from the first movie, and together they prepare for a day of excitement and bloodshed, where, as luck would have it, Hanno makes his gladiatorial debut and fights a man riding a rhinoceros.
Right.
However, there's something about Hanno that Lucilia recognizes, and it doesn't take long for her to come to the realization that Hanno is actually her son Lucius, who went into hiding after the events of the first movie, and whom she thought had been killed. And if that isn't wild enough, it turns out that Lucius is the son of Maximus.
What?
Now, does this revelation about Lucius being Maximus's son make any sense at all? No, it doesn't. Does the movie take the time to explore the timeline of events where this could have happened? Also no. And please stick around to the end of this video because I'm going to talk more about this later. Anyway, as the bodies in the Colosseum start to pile up, the thirst for revenge gets stronger, and a plot to overthrow the Empire begins to reveal itself, the movie we end up with is absolutely terrible, featuring poorly written, underdeveloped characters played by actors who look bored on screen, action sequences that are clumsily put together and surprisingly dull, visuals that are sometimes laughably bad, and a score that is non-existent. When I say that the actors look bored, they perform as if they'd rather be anywhere else, completely disconnected from the material. And honestly, who could blame them? The characters are so underdeveloped and so uninteresting that it's hard to imagine anyone, let alone the actors involved, feeling invested in what's happening with the characters. Paul Mescal, who plays Lucius, is an actor that I don't recognize from anything else, but it's obvious to me that he was miscast in this movie, and his performance can pretty much be boiled down to two things. It's time to yell, or it's time to give a speech.
I'm not a general, but we are all soldiers.
In regards to Pedro Pascal, he continues his long-established career of giving bland performances that have somehow managed to get him cast in every major Hollywood production for the past 5 years.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
Here's a question for you. Do you remember how great a character Commodus was? A fascinatingly flawed villain whose insatiable need for admiration led to his ultimate downfall? Wouldn't it be great if these twin rulers had the same kind of complexity and depth? Well, too bad, because unfortunately, they're about as deep as a puddle of water and played by two actors who seem to have had little to no direction for their performances. Even Joseph Quinn, who I've liked in other things, is just not very good. And most shocking of all, even Denzel Washington, who I think we can all agree is one of the greatest actors to ever get in front of a camera, gives a lackluster performance. Literally, every character in this movie is so terribly written, and the performances are so terribly executed that it's almost embarrassing to watch. And the fact that someone thought that this was good enough to be put on screen really boggles the mind.
Did you just say mind-boggling?
Yeah, mind-boggling.
Now, you would think that a movie about gladiators fighting would at least have some great action sequences. Sadly, however, the action in Gladiator 2 only adds to the giant
Pile of shit.
that is this movie. Not a single one of them is competently shot, and none of them seem to have any real stakes, develop any characters, or progress the plot. They just kind of happen, and then it's on to the next scene. However, the fights in the original movie help develop the two main characters, Maximus and Commodus, as the Colosseum becomes a stage for their personal conflict. Every time Maximus enters the arena, we get to see more of his skill as a fighter, his ability to lead men, and his unyielding desire to seek justice for his wife and son. So, in this regard, the gladiatorial combat in the first movie not only serves as spectacle, but also allows the audience to learn more about him as a person and as a character. As for Commodus, the gladiatorial fights are a visual representation of his inability to be an effective leader. He's not a particularly wise man, nor is he humble enough to seek effective counsel. Instead, he would rather use violence to manipulate the citizens of Rome instead of governing with wisdom or strength. But as Maximus begins to win a bunch of fights and his popularity grows, the control that Commodus has begins to slip. His desire to be loved at any cost prevents him from making the logical decision of killing Maximus when he has the chance, which in turn leads to their final fight and his death. Everything that happens in the Colosseum and Gladiator not only affects the fighters involved, but also affects every character in the movie and progresses the plot to its climax. It's storytelling that's so well executed, the fact that Gladiator 2 was made by the same person is hard to comprehend. So by now, you're probably thinking to yourself, why compare Gladiator 2 so much to the original movie? Shouldn't you just judge it based on its own merits? And normally, I'd agree. However, this movie goes out of its way to remind you of the first film so much that it invites those comparisons to be made. The opening credits of Gladiator 2 are just a recap of the first movie. The plot is exactly the same. A lot of the dialogue is exactly the same.
I will never be your instrument in this life or the next.
And I will have my vengeance in this life or the next.
And even the final shot of Gladiator 2 is directly lifted from the first movie. This makes it clear, to me at least, that the filmmakers knew they didn't have enough story for the movie to stand on its own. And these constant callbacks cause Gladiator 2 to collapse under the weight of its far superior predecessor, proving that this is a sequel that should have never been made. Now, before we wrap things up, I want to go back to a moment that I mentioned earlier in the video about the revelation that Lucius is the son of Maximus and Lucia. I've seen a lot of chatter online stating that this is something that's implied in the first movie when we learn that Maximus and Lucia had a relationship in the past. However, I'm certain that this is nothing more than a massive outbreak of the Mandela effect, because when you go back and look at this scene, this is what's said.
And I hear you have a son.
Lucius. He'll be nearly 8 years old.
My son is also nearly 8.
Both Maximus's actual son and Lucius are the same age, which means that in order for Maximus to be Lucius's father, he and Lucilia would have had to had an affair while they were both married to other people. Now, I'm well aware that people are complicated and that affairs happen, but when you consider everything that Maximus goes through in the first movie, I just don't think that it would have happened. I mean, he kills his executioners with his hands literally tied together. Then, while bleeding out from a sword wound, he rides a horse so hard that it dies and gets back home to find his farm burned to the ground and see that his family has been killed, an event that causes his rage and vengeance to become so intense that he tries to topple the entire empire and kills the man responsible for his family's death with his bare hands. When you take all of that into account, I just don't buy that he would have had an affair. Is this hero worship on my part? Possibly. However, I think the filmmakers are aware of the damage that this would do to Maximus as a character, and I think this because in Gladiator 2, they actually make Lucius older, saying that he was 12 during the events of the first movie, not nearly 8. So, about now, you're probably thinking, isn't it possible that Maximus was in captivity for about 4 years after this conversation took place? Well, no. It's not. The movie clearly states that Commodus is holding the gladiatorial games to commemorate the death of his father, and that those games will last 150 days, the last of which is the day that Maximus kills Commodus in the Colosseum. So, even if Lucius was 7 years and 7 months old when this conversation took place, the oldest he would have been by the end of the movie is 9, not 12. This retcon is an obvious attempt to allow the filmmakers to justify Maximus being Lucius's father while maintaining his reputation as a faithful and loving husband. If Lucius is 4 years older than Maximus's other son, that means that Lucius is the result of the relationship that Maximus and Lucilia had before Maximus was married, rather than a hidden consequence of a one-night stand that Maximus was unaware of. But with all that said, if anyone could point out to me where I'm wrong on this, I'd certainly like to know, because it's very possible that I missed something. Don't get me wrong, I scoured the first movie looking for evidence that Maximus could be Lucius's father, but I just don't see it, nor do I even think it's implied, as so many others seem to think that it is. So, at the end of the day, would I recommend this movie? Absolutely not. Not even at a discounted matinee price would I recommend you go see this movie. It's nothing more than a hollow, cheap copy of the first Gladiator movie that offers nothing new, and honestly, you'd be much better off staying home and watching the original Gladiator, or going to see Wicked, which is apparently getting great reviews. Although, I hear it has some very strange subtext.
There's a blowjob reference almost every 10 seconds. Broadway writers call it subtext.
Take me away to that special place. That blowjob place.